Hello, everyone. Um, Thank you for coming tonight to the launch of the spring issue number 32 of Catamaran. My name is Kathryn Segerson, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Catamaran. And I'm just really excited for this new issue. I don't know if you all have it yet, but this is the lovely spring issue. And this time I had the pleasure of doing an interview with Jane Smiley. And it was a really fun interview. We talked for a long time. Not all of the interview is in the magazine, but I did talk to her about her new book, which is a novel set in Paris, and the main character is a horse, and there's another character that's a dog, and they have wonderful personalities, and it's just a magical book. And so the cover is sort of an homage to Jane's book, and I just think it's some beautiful art from a local artist, Mari Klopel, who lives in Elkhorn in the Monterey Bay. So tonight we have 13 contributors are going to be reading from their work, about 5 minutes each. Let me just tell you a little bit about how this works. You can interact with us in the chat room the whole time. And if you have any questions about the technology, you can go down here and ask a question, and that'll come directly to me. So feel free to just let me know if you're having any trouble. But also feel free to interact with us and say nice things about what you hear tonight, and give encouragement to our readers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader, and our managing editor, Elizabeth McKenzie, and I are going to take turns. So she'll come on the screen next after me. All right, so our first author is Jerry Dale McDonnell. And Jerry is a retired Alaskan bush teacher and bear viewing and fishing guide, as well as an actor and playwright. His fiction and journalism credits include South Dakota Review, Mung Bean, Over the Transom, Cirque, Dan River Anthology, Anchorage Daily News, the Peninsula Clarion, the Alaska Journal of Commerce, Calaveras Enterprise, Dead Snakes, and others. His one-act play, Engines of Time, was a finalist in the 2018 Tennessee Williams Literary Festival, and a selection of his stories is forthcoming from Cirque Press. So I'm going to invite Jerry to join us on screen, and it might just take a minute. So bear with us, because there's a lot of people, 98 people here tonight. So that's exciting. Let's see. Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's really exciting to see this many people here to celebrate things like memoir and poetry and short stories. And I'm excited to hear Jerry read too. If you've ever gone on a journey to Alaska to see bears or whales, you'll love Jerry's piece. And here he comes. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, Catamaran. This nonfiction piece is a day in the life of a bear viewing guide, of which I was, among other things. I'm now retired from that. I have abridged the piece to fit 5 minutes, which means it's rather sketchy. My apologies to the bears. It's entitled Bear Ugly, Beluga Beautiful. Dave said to jump off the boat in the middle of the bay, so I did. It was 4 a.m. dark, no moon dark. Chitina Bay, like many waters in Alaska, has a sense of humor. Opening up wide off the Cook Inlet, it pretends it's an ocean, but mudflats hide inches below its murky surface. But Dave Correa, owner and operator of Silver Salmon Creek Lodge, was up to its tricks. We were running in with a rising tide, so there, Chitina Bay, take that. And it did, and changed the bottom for where it was last year. So when I jumped off the boat way too many yards offshore, the water was only knee deep. It was a typical early August summer routine in south central Bush, Alaska. Sleep for 3 hours, load the boat at 3 a.m., run an hour or so down the coast in the dark, run up a creek, and beach your boat for 12 hours in a canyon, swatting bugs and keeping an eye out for bears until the next high tide. Boat afloat, I smiled as the first light of day eased over the eastern horizon and gave a polish to smooth water. The water was a slick. No wind, just the way the bugs like it. The day had promise. Dry dock in Clearwater Creek means being a long way from a long way. Roads and towns are 50 or so miles water east. All other directions are Lake Clark National Park and Preserve. The trip up Clearwater Creek is a highlight of the summer for all of us, both clients and guides, similar to remembering your first kiss. The boat would be stranded high on mud for 12 hours or so until the next tide came in. We had the fishermen on the creek not more than 5 minutes when a bear came out of the woods 15 yards upstream. It looked at us with surprise. I looked at it as ugly. Now, I love the brown bears. They are not wanton killers. They just get bad press. But this guy walked with an attitude like a juvenile delinquent and seemed to lack confidence. Most brown bears walk confident, an attitude I prefer. The bear went across the creek and up the other side. I knew we were in its fishing hole. I reasoned it must have considered it was outnumbered or was being cautious. I say cautious as brown bears think before they act with intention. Alaska coastal brown bears are usually peaceable critters, but eating is their main occupation and their table manners are lacking. Asking for food to be passed, which they have taken a whiff of, is not in their book of etiquette. They are inclined to reach across the table and grab. So I figured he'd be back. Noon found most of us back at the boat, the sun in our face, sandwich in hand, and watching bald eagles soar. "Sherry," Dave shouted, coming back to the boat with a stringer of fish and 2 clients. "Take my rifle, we're being stalked. There's a bear coming behind us." When we turned back to look, he ducks down in the grass. I've never had yet to shoot a bear, but I don't wish to. I've had moments, but negotiation has always been successful. Sure enough, not 30 yards down the trail in the high grass, there it was, stalking, head down, sniffing. It stopped when he saw me and veered off the trail to the right. It wasn't a particularly large bear and was rather thin, which is not a good sign this time of year. I clapped my hands loud and fast. It raised up on its hind leg, which is an investigative posture, not an aggressive posture. It gave me a look and a sniff and loped off back in the direction it had come. To this day, I don't know what it is about clapping hands. Maybe it mimics snapping teeth, a warning sound or stress, but it often seems to work better than many things I've found. We only had 3 bear visits that day. Now, I can tell you many bear stories, yet I don't feel qualified to write the bear behavior textbook. Nevertheless, I have some methods that have served me well. Back on the creek, as the afternoon sun slipped over the canyon wall, it signed that the water in the creek is risen. The boat must be afloat. Shooing the clients back to the boat, I heard my name called. It was Ugly Bear again. Dave and a client were once again being stalked. They had 6 salmon. Ugly Bear was sneaking through the grass beside the trail and was getting bolder. The client sent back to the boat with the fish. Dave and I stood side by side, clapping our hands. Ugly Bear reared its head, shook it, clicked its teeth, but retreated. Aboard the boat, Dave was about to start the engine when a client said she had left her fishing rod on the beach in the upper hole. Dave stood on the bank covering me with his rifle. I waited, scanning the woods for movement. If Ugly Bear was there, he was playing it cool. We'd been there 12 hours. Those bears were getting used to us, or tired of putting up with us. which is not a good thing. I stopped every few steps, looking at each new perspective in the bush. Recovered rod in hand, I made it back to Dave on the high bank without incident. Turning, I took a final look back at that fishing hole. 2 bears stepped out of the bush. Ugly Bear was one of them. He came out exactly where the rod had been. I tipped my hat to him. Afloat and underway, the sun and a clear sky were still our friend. A breeze came up, wrinkling the water. Not a word was spoken. Tired, smiling eyes were taking in the distant horizon, the water, the mountain, the seabirds, the bald eagles, the salmon jumping, and a few seals poking their heads from the surface. The word beluga broke the silence. All around the boat, in front, on the side, behind, a pod of 40 or so beluga whales were roller coasting their sleek white backs above the surface. Dave cut back on the throttle. The belugas escorted us out of the bay into Cook Inlet. Nobody mentioned at that moment how privileged we felt, and nobody asked me to jump overboard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I wish there was time to hear the whole piece, but that was a really good way of excerpting it. Our next reader is Chun Yu. Chun Yu, PhD, is a poet, graphic novelist, and scientist. She is the author of the award-winning memoir, Little Green, Growing Up During the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and a historical graphic novel in progress on Mao and Emperor Li Yu. She contributed to the award-winning anthology Veterans of War, Veterans of Peace. Her new poetry collection in English and Chinese has won a San Francisco Arts Commission Cultural Equity Initiative grant and merges science, art, and spirituality based on her experiences as an immigrant from an old culture in revolution to a new world with transforming science and technologies. Please welcome Chun Yu.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Catamaran for this beautiful, beautiful issue. I am really honored and thrilled to be published on it. And I was born in the year of horse. So when I saw the cover, I was overjoyed. So thank you, Kathryn and Elizabeth. So I'm going to read my poem that's published on this issue. It's called The Labyrinth. I wrote this poem for the Grace Cathedral of San Francisco. Many of you probably had walked the labyrinth on the ground outside of the cathedral. So The Labyrinth. Although admiring your gorgeous church towering into the clouds, I wander in your labyrinth on the low ground with the heart of a common being, searching blindly, hoping to break out of ignorance. Although marveling at your neon rainbow ladder reaching to the sky, I linger in your maze in the dust of the world with the mind of a common being, zigzagging endlessly, longing to step into heaven. We are all living beings looking up to you, like looking up toward a dream within ourselves, yet far and out of reach. Maybe someday grace brings enlightenment as revelations descend quietly. It was we who erected the church overlooking the world from the labyrinth of our hearts. It was we who set up the rainbow ladder to heaven from the maze of our minds. The second poem is called The Map. I also called The Map of Love. It was published on Poem of the Day by the San Francisco Public Library. And the Chinese version was published in China first on Xinhua Daily. So I wrote this poem for my parents, who I haven't seen since the lockdown of last year. They are in China. Given the current situation, I have no idea when I will be able to see them. I know so many of us are separated from our loved ones. So with the map of love, I hope we will each find our way and be united with our loved ones wherever they might be now. The map. When I was born, your bosom was the map. I occupied all of it in your cradling arms. When I began to walk, your eyesight was the map. I learned my steps, toddling and waddling in your adoring gaze. When I started school, your mind became the map. I ventured out and back from morning to night in your unceasing care. When I grew up and left home, from hometown to other towns, home country to other countries, your heart became the map. I searched far and wide, high and low, for my direction and a place in the world, in your loving thoughts. Each time I set out for a journey, you asked for my destination, studied an open map, accurately locating the point of my being. Then one day, you picked up a magnifying glass, eyes moving closer and closer, hands trembling more and more. Finally, at a loss, not seeing clearly the lines and points on the map, you hold me in your heart. Growing older and older, you can now only walk in my eyesight, fumbling steps, every trip outside an adventure. From now on, I will walk by your side so you can lean on me when we are at a loss, not knowing where to go. Love is the map. Thank you.
Thank you, Chun. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Our next reader is Renee Winter. Renee Winter is a retired attorney who traded billable hours for more writing time. Her personal essays have appeared in such journals as Exposition Review, Q, Memoir Magazine, 34th Parallel, and Coachella, and are forthcoming in the Avalon Literary Review, the London Reader, and Star 82 Review. Winter is a volunteer teacher in the Power in Poetry program, bringing poetry and writing into the county jails, an experience that has showed her good writing is found everywhere. She is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, but she's lived in Santa Cruz for 16 years with her husband, Paul Roth, a philosophy professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Their family includes 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and 1 curly, white-haired poodle. and she's delighted to have her work appear in Catamaran, and we're delighted to have her. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you, Kathryn. It is an honor to be among these wonderful artists and writers. This is a sliver of a piece of memoir, and to read the rest, I guess you'll have to get the whole magazine. Breakfast special. Some mornings I'd breakfast with Prince Charles. Chuck, as he liked me to call him, was on holiday from a posh English prep school. We sat next to each other on red counter stools at the local diner near 17th and Collins Avenue in Miami Beach, a few blocks from where Mother lived. Having just completed 11th grade, I arrived the day before from St. Louis to spend another summer vacation visiting her. Mother was working, and any friends I made the previous summers were all scattered. But Chuck was at my side, his shoulders taut, back rigid, and flinching whenever his seat squeaked as he swiveled toward me. Muttering about American food, my prince wished for scones and tea rather than the cardboard-like triangles lathered with butter, framing his lump of scrambled eggs. How do you Yanks eat such dribble? To jolly Chuck out of his complaints, I smiled, put a spoonful of hot buttery grits into his pouty mouth, and coaxed him to admit that being with me made up for the distasteful food. Placing his palm on mine, his imperial fingers calloused from polo playing, he leaned over, kissed my cheek, and whispered how he wanted to take me to his school's formal. This was long before Diana and Camilla. And after we can go to our place by the English shore, do a spin on our yacht. Chuck paused and patted his sweaty forehead with his monogram hanky. My goodness, how do you chaps keep from melting? I pictured myself on the deck of the Royal Yacht Britannia, Union Jack flying in the wind, and Prince Charles' arm around my waist. In my fantasy world, even a Jewish girl from the Midwest could enchant royalty. Here's your check, sweetie, a curly blonde waitress in a black and yellow checkered uniform interrupted, pushing a pencil-scribbled tab towards me with one hand and holding a coffee pot with the other. Chuck vanished. Thanks. I pulled two $1 bills from my pocket, returned to my teen magazine, and finished the last of my egg special. No extra charge for the waft of bacon grease. The buzzing conversation of other diners, the rustling of newspapers, and the ringing of the cash register surrounded me. Still, I hated the silence of eating alone. Miami Beach in the early 60s was filled with bronze retirees surviving on Social Security, gay men who felt safe lying next to lovers on crowded expanses of sand, and divorcees in bouffant hairdos seeking yet another husband. It would be decades before the area was transformed into an Art Deco district with galleries, boutique hotels, wine bars, and panache at every turn. This was the South Beach of coffee shops touting $1.99 breakfast, delis offering Kaiser rolls stacked with 2 inches of corned beef, and convenience stores selling chiclets and Chesterfields. Mother's home was a kitchenless room at the President Hotel. In spite of its commanding name, the hotel was a drab 3-story stucco residence with a front porch of unraveling wicker furniture, pots of artificial roses, and ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts that created a lingering tobacco smell. A worn, coffee-stained rug supported a lobby of faded flamingo wallpaper, faux leather sofas, and a desk clerk with Vitalis slicked hair, who stared a little too long at Mother's halter's top whenever she walked by. Even with the dinginess of her living space, Mother loved Miami Beach. The place was a playground of sunshine, sand, and singles dances. When I visited, it became my playground too. The palm trees embraced me. The moist air with its tinge of salt, no matter day or night, warmed. The blue expanse of the ocean mesmerized. I relinquished my body to the gentle ways of the Atlantic, letting them caress me like the lover I had yet to know. During those summers, I could almost forgive Mother for leaving us. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So I will introduce now our next reader, who is Best of the Net nominee, Kathryn Petrucelli. Kathryn Petrucelli holds an MA in teaching English language learners. Her professional life has included translating Hotel California for Hungarian high schoolers and anthologizing poetry by rival gang members. She was a finalist for the 2019 Omnidawn Single Poem Broadside Prize, and her work has appeared in New Ohio Review, Rattle, Poet Lore, and other magazines. Please welcome Kathryn Petrucelli.
Hi. Hi, it's so lovely to be here. I'm thrilled to be in this issue. As everyone has said, it's gorgeous. And thank you so much for listening tonight. So I have gone a little bit crazy trying to figure out what order to read you these poems in, but here we go. So I'm going to end with a poem that's actually in the journal. All of these poems are from a collection, a series that I've done that I consider to be love letters, essentially, to West Coast Florida that I desperately miss. I am speaking to you right now from Western Massachusetts. So this first piece is called Salvia Leucantha. I always extended a hand as I went by, needed to feel what it was to brush against you. And for your part, you reached back, purple fingers over the path. Soft, soft, you dropped petals, making your own bed. You were irresistible to me, where mostly I am measured in my affections. I'm embarrassed to admit, until now, I only knew your common name, Mexican sage. It never felt like enough. I wanted to know things about you that just anyone on the street wouldn't know. I will tell you truthfully, it hurt me that you let go of your blossoms so easily at anyone's touch. This next piece is called Sticky Monkey Flower. And I'm excited to read it to people that might actually know what it is, at least the Californians in the audience. So, Sticky Monkey Flower, Mimulus aurantiacus. Puckered for a kiss, your flower's golden lips beg all the way up the trail. Are you just about the show? Sticky Monkey, stage name to beat. Look at the audience you draw. Bush lupin, prickly pear, Indian paintbrush, scarlet pimpernel, poison oak draped around you like it owns you. It never used to be like this, all bustle and flame. You were salve, eased fever. The coast Miwok, the Pomo, they knew. You relieved burning. Have we forgotten your roots? These days, it feels like a matter of time. Everyone at the party knocking paper cups together, pointing manicured fingers at the view, a petal away from combusting. Right now, in another place, the blazes chase glossy black cockatoos, water skinks, bristlebirds. How deep is memory buried? So beautiful, your scorched little mouths. And I have one more poem, which is the poem in Catamaran. It is California Poppy, Escolzia californica. Until I met you, I prayed to water, but you shone in want. What's it like to grow from where the earth cracks in thirst? I have walked and walked, crying out for home, stumbled dirty over barren ground, eyes on the road behind me, finally, to come to you amidst nothing. Golden tongues lapping light, sun on a stem, your green feathered hands. How have you made loneliness a virtue? I will not call you fire. Even as you burn, orange flash on brown bluff. Fire can be tamed. Gas lamps, their slow reservoirs of fuel, or sticks of wax, ready at any moment to smother captive flames. You are another kind of wild, will accept only death if plucked from your hill. You, my home, the one I never dreamed, solitary, still, only the barking of sea lions far below, a small breeze now and then, your steady glow. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the readings.
Thank you, Kathryn. That was really beautiful.
Thanks.
I see you have a deep appreciation for our West Coast. It's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Our next reader is Neal Snidow. Neal Snidow writes and photographs in Magalia, California. His work has appeared in Catamaran and Chicago Quarterly Review, and his book Vista Del Mar, A Memoir of the Ordinary, was published by Counterpoint Press in 2016. So we're thrilled to have Neal Snidow with us again in Catamaran. His work appears in the magazine also with his own photography. So he's a wonderful photographer and a writer. So be sure to check it out so you can see his photography as well. And I know he's going to be here in a second, but while we're waiting, thank you all for making such nice comments in the chat room. It's nice when you do that because it feels like we're having an actual launch event, you know, like that there's community around the different readings and the different poets and writers. And it's also kind of fun that we have people from all over and the East Coast as well. And so thank you guys for staying up so late tonight and joining us for, well, to be read to by our poets and writers. And I know Neal is going to be here in just a second. I see something's happening. Could be a little slow. We have a lot of people with us tonight, 108 people. So maybe the connection is a little slow. take a sip of your wine. I know it's happy hour or after happy hour for the people on the East Coast. Um, hmm. I'm just... All right, well, I'm still waiting for Neal to come on, and I don't know, something's happened with my video possibly too, but we're going to continue on. I just want to mention a couple of other things that I wanted to share with you guys. We have a poetry prize right now, and it's open for submissions. So make sure if you have a manuscript of poetry, consider sending us your manuscript for the Catamaran Poetry Prize. All right, so I'm going to try and see if I can get Neal. Sorry about this, you guys. I'm going to try Neal one more time, and then if he can't connect, we will go to our next reader. The other thing we have going on is the Catamaran Poetry Prize is open for submissions until April 20th. The other thing we have going on is the online craft workshops, and we have a fiction workshop open for registration with Christine Sneed. So that's still got some spaces left if you want to join us for a 4-week fiction workshop. All right, I'm going to invite Elizabeth McKenzie up to introduce Jamie Wendt, and then we'll try Neal back. Sorry. Oh, it was going so smooth. All right, so Jamie is going to be invited up for the poetry reading, and he will be introduced by Elizabeth McKenzie. That seems to be working.
Hello.
Hi, or Jamie. Sorry, Jamie.
Not sure if I should go ahead and start or if we're waiting for, was it Elizabeth? Okay, I'll wait.
Oh, hello there. I'm sorry. Hello, are we going to take me off and go back to Jamie here?
Can you
Hi,
see me
Kathryn.
now?
I'm finally here, kid.
Hi.
You know what? Let's go with Neal because it took him
Perfect.
so long to connect.
Yeah.
And then
Didn't
we'll
it
come
ever?
back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So I'm going to
I'm
take
so
you.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's totally okay.
We have very poor.
Oh.
Hello there, everybody. So am I up and running, Kathryn?
Yeah, you can take it away, Neal.
Thank you so much. I'm
Okay.
so sorry this bulky Wi-Fi or internet of ours. I'm Neal, and I so want to thank Kathryn and Elizabeth and everyone else on staff there. This is a pretty long essay of mine. I'm just thrilled that the folks at Catamaran could find a home for it, and I'm going to read a bit of it. It's a memoir piece. It is about memory, and this is a scene-setting moment that occurs at the beginning of the piece. And again, I'm sorry to burst in. Here it comes. For those of us rich with recall, a wealth, an embarrassment, or a burden, depending on what we've been up to, and which will soon enough be taken away, the details of our earlier years can feel like some sort of row, some hanging fertile deposit packed into the mind. What to make of them? They seem somehow numinous, and therefore part of the mystery of the long recovery of which I'm speaking. For instance, on an afternoon in 1963 at our high school in Redondo Beach, California, my hometown, during a half-court game of pickup basketball, my friend Jim Tingley signaled his availability to receive a pass. We were playing on the outside courts at the foot of the locker room stairs as they extended from the old gym building. Inside the gym, built in the 1920s, yellow painted walls shone like linoleum, while in the empty locker room near the high ceiling, dimpled, opaque, wire-reinforced hopper windows dropped inward on their chains to reveal squares of overcast, the softened gray under which we are playing. Outside, a row of asphalt courts showed rusting hoops and backboards, boundaries and keys marked with fading white stripe. Perhaps a half-mile west lay the ocean, so that from certain fortunate elevations on the campus, surf could be viewed. But here in the shadow of the gym, the ocean is only a feeling of grayness in this microclimate of blocky, mission-style building corners, concrete steps, shadows, and hill bottoms where sand is always just edging over the blacktop's fox-tailed, dandelioned margins. Ice Plant, as it does, is reaching coolly onto the court under the backboard from the base of the hill at the top of which jut the great chrome-rimmed dual headlights of the early 60s and late 50s vehicles students have driven to school. In this hush, all that can be heard are the whisper of cars on Diamond rolling east and west. Streets perpendicular to the sea in the older pre-suburban center are named for jewels and gems: beryl, sapphire, ruby, garnet, and emerald. Then at right angles, in the romantic advertising of 1920s Southern California, the era of old Mexico and Latin lovers drafted into the effort of selling films, citrus, bungalows to Midwesterners drifting to the Golden State, North-South avenues were given female Spanish names: Lucia, Inez, Maria, some out of sheer subdivision mood-making, but some the actual daughters of the Dominguez family, the land-grant Californios who had first owned the thousands of acres of seaside, hill, and dune where this city would be built on sand. All these curvatures surround a center in which our game is quietly progressing. Sand is the sound, the pleasing rasp of tennis shoes, Purcells and Converse, or street shoes even from good value Tom McCann, shuffling, just slightly scuffing in a soft shoe Sandman like Fred Astaire, serenading his downstairs neighbor, Ginger Rogers, in Top Hat, filmed maybe 10 miles north of us 30 years earlier. And the six of us are hardly louder than the gliding Astaire as we shuffle, try for shot, feint, go up, rebound. In the gray afternoon, bounce passing, playing half court, all of us are utterly at home in the motion and ritual language of the game. Take it out, swish, Zeke from Cabin Creek. This used to amuse us for some reason. And in the midst of this trance-like meditative shuffling and bouncing, Jim announces his openness, his availability for the ball by singing unselfconsciously in a light tenor voice. His availability, the opening line of Brenda Lee's recent hit, All Alone Am I. so that someone will get this reference, this suave martini dry hint, and pass him the ball. Ridiculous, of course. So absurdly genteel. This is us in our ultra polite, striving middle class upbringing, but opening so naturally out of this moment. What coolness and self possession under the overcast. What unforced grace as Jim steps into his open quadrant of asphalt and sings his musical cue. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm again so sorry the electronics dragged along. Kathryn, are you there? Oh, okay. I will. So go. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, thanks, Neal.
Hey.
Thank you, Neal.
Oh, we're all in
Bye-bye.
here. Okay,
You bet.
okay.
Oh, good.
Now everyone.
Now
It's slow, but now it's fast. Okay.
now I can introduce Jamie Wendt. Jamie is the author of the poetry collection Fruit of the Earth, which was the winner of the 2019 National Federation of Presswomen Book Award. Her poetry has been published in various literary journals and anthologies, including Feminine Rising, Voices of Power and Invisibility, Lilith, the Raleigh Review, Minerva Rising, Third Wednesday, and Saranac Review. Her essays and book reviews have been published in Green Mountains Review, The Forward, Literary Mama, and other magazines. She holds an MFA from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. She teaches high school English and lives in Chicago with her husband and 2 children. Please welcome Jamie Wendt.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be part of Catamaran and to be here this evening. Can you all hear me okay? Hopefully it's working. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start off with the poem that is in the magazine, which just arrived in the mail yesterday. It's beautiful. My poem is called Strange Worlds, which is after the painting by Todros Geller. Commuters rush to work. Their race is a busy swirl of speeding hands on a broken clock crashing into each other. The old Hasidic man's eyes hold me, the viewer. Look at me, he says. Or rather, I am looking at you and wondering what you think of this fast-paced life. I step back a few feet in the American Gallery at the Art Institute of Chicago and can see both the man in Strange Worlds and the man in Grant Wood's American Gothic a few frames away. His eyes grab attention. Look at me, my life. Look behind me, my house, my pitchfork, my America. Look here. Geller pulls me back. His name printed in the left-hand corner, oil on canvas, 1928. I'll hide here under the tracks, the old Hasidic man tells me as the hurricane of suits and newspapers seizes the Chicago scene. Vibrations from the elevated train will not move him. The circling of people outside the past will not move him, will not stir his stare, his desire for the familiar. No one here has ever looked like me. But it would be a mistake to freeze him like a relic, a memory, a long-lost relative. He is myself, my ancestors disguised in a black hat, red eyes wrinkled, trying to embody and absorb the colors, sharp angles, coins tossed to rusty jazz, rained over this untuned, strange city. And then I'll read 2 other poems. I've been working on a manuscript that sort of revolves around my Jewish family's roots in Chicago, which that poem is part of the manuscript that I'm working on. And then this poem that I'm going to read is a persona poem called The Eisenhower Expressway Speaks, 1951. And this was recently published in Green Mountains Review. Boys wrestle in the pit of me, a play lot after their playground is torn down. Journalists call them morons, vandals, and hoodlums, but I like their company, the love they make in me, pressed into my rocks, my dirt, sprinkled with excavation debris. My birth has been slower than anticipated. My length, my due date, my round-the-clock noise expanding west of Chicago, a slow season of change, of flight. Everyone watches and waits. After summer storms, I turn into a brown river. Boys bring rafts, float through my stalled construction like a vacation cruise. Men scavenge for treasure from demolished businesses and homes to lure their women to me, a lover's nest at night. The near West Side sweeps its sidewalks free of otherness for me, free of poor immigrants and exiled refugees who move north or farther west when I intrude, slam the landscape, so deafening, so white-handed. As crews shovel, they excavate and lift dead bodies from under my skin. I pause patiently, partly severed, as a cemetery relocates for me. Then workers lie me back down, smooth me out for miles, with shattered family fortunes directed elsewhere. After the next storm, I cough out bones, and the boys play fetch like dogs. And then I'll read one more poem, which is from my book, Fruit of the Earth, which came out in 2018 by Main Street Rag Press. This poem that I'll read is called The Sparrows. A ketubah is a marriage document that's signed at a wedding, and Amma refers to my grandma. That's what I called her because I couldn't say grandma. Amma. The Sparrows. We prepared the burial at the kitchen table, chalk in our throats with fresh honey. Shrouds without pockets fell from the rabbi's lips, white fabric starched, a bath for the body, scentless soaps. Mom scribbled on paper, illegible curves rushing from her hand, pencil lead rubbed like winter clouds, a blur of something to do instead of cry. A holocaust of words, she wrote and wrote what he said, would not stop her dictations when sparrows from a ketubah came to life on the canvas on the wall. Flew around the kitchen in circles, hovering over Mom, the great-grandchildren Amma would not know. The rabbi remained focused on his to-dos, as if the birds escaping their frame were normal. Little white shrouds on a kitchen table, nothing out of the ordinary. Like a mother writing the wrong way on lined paper in the middle of the afternoon that was evening gray and cold, anticipating the entrance of Elijah, his saving, the saving from ourselves and our need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, our next reader is Suphil Lee Park. She's the author of Present Tense Complex, winner of the Maristina Santiesteban First Book Prize, and forthcoming in 2021 from Conduit Books and Ephemera. She grew up in South Korea and graduated from New York University with a BA in English and from the University of Texas at Austin with an MFA in poetry. Her poems and short stories have appeared or are forthcoming in Colorado Review, Global Poetry Anthology, Image, Plowshares, Quarterly West, and The Common Online, among others. Please welcome Suphil Lee Park.
Hi, thank you for having me today. And I'm gonna read my short story published on Catamaran called Eye of the Needle. I had to edit out some passages, but hopefully it doesn't feel like it's missing too much. Okay. Um, Eye of the Needle. A week after the Moon Festival, my cousin Min and I watched the first moth emerge in our silkworm farm. By that time, I had been living with my aunt for more than 3 months, since my mom unloaded me in our cramped apartment and took off. And between us girls, there was already a stable sense of understanding that wearing the same school uniform would instill in two teenage girls, forced to acknowledge each other on a daily basis. We kept the silkworm farm kit despite my aunt's dismay, and even though we managed to rear only 5 to the stage of cocooning. That morning, 2 of the cocoons showed a hint of opening, and from the cracks emerged 2 silk moths. We were going to give the moths 1 day to dry their wings and recharge themselves, because they seemed unable to fly off right away. Min said those poor things would need time to adjust to their new bodies. I'd later find out that silk moths are flightless, but only years after that day, Min lifted them out the cage, then out the window. They sat on the railing for a while, probably having a fit of acrophobia, before reluctantly crawling away. We waited for the last cocoon to open up after the other 2 set out. Do you think that poor thing didn't make it? Min would ask. She even named it Tantoni, although it would have happened well into its middle age had it been a human being. Besides, it would live up to 10 days at most after metamorphosis. But I held my tongue as she fished it out with chopsticks and started scissoring it open from one side. Inside the cocoon were not 1, but 2 silk moths, crumpled up dead, pressed against each other as a vacuum pack for a long-distance delivery. Min barely caught the cocoon the moment it slid from her hand and laid on the floor. Through the slit, we could see it was filled with what looked like iron shavings, some of which spilled onto the floor. Eggs, said Min, a half question. We will learn that on rare occasions, a couple of silkworms end up in the same cocoon, sharing the shelter, where they would transform, mate, and lay eggs until they finally die together within it. But there was no explanation why such a thing would happen. Whether the silkworms choose to lock themselves in so they wouldn't need to go search for a mate, or it happens by accident. Probably strands of silk get entangled and pull them closer, eventually binding them to the same fate. Probably the whole cocooning process occurs in a haze, and they just get lost in the moment. The image would haunt me in years to come, even after my mother, to everyone's surprise, appeared to actually take me home, thanking my aunt profusely for looking after me for more than a year. And while my mother divorced my first stepfather quickly, and as quickly found the second one, me and Min drifting apart all along, and even as I dropped out of college and was working at hostels across Europe, sleeping next to women of all races I didn't care a lick about on some especially boring weekends, then going places with men I knew even less about. Yes, those moths would haunt me of all things. The 2 silk moths lying motionless, head to head, as if they'd been whispering to each other. Let's be cavemen, stay in the dark, keep our feeble wings folded and to ourselves. When they began to change, every fiber of their being growing wafery and wispy, did their memory also lose mass and turn into more insubstantial materials, so their lighter bodies could bear the weight? What remained of those crawling things they used to be? When they woke up in the same dark den as most, did they recognize each other? Did they reach out to know if it was their cocoon mate, or had they become strangers by then? Did they speak different tones? And when they finally found each other, which would have happened right away in the compact space, was there a moment of hesitation before they did what they were destined to do, closing what little distance there was between them tight? When it was finished and eggs were laid, when death neared, was there still left in them a sparkle of instinct to burst out into the world? Or after all, their one purpose achieved all the same, everything to be found, was it all gone? To know not a single answer scared the hell out of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Suphil.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. Our next reader is Lucian Mattison. Lucian Mattison is an Argentinian-American poet and translator, and author of 2 books of poetry, Reaper's Milonga and Peregrination. He has poetry, short fiction, and translations that appear in numerous journals, including Cutbank, Hayden's Ferry Review, Hobart, Pank, The Offing, and Sixth Finch. He's currently based out of the Bay Area and is an associate editor of poetry for Barrel House. Please welcome Lucian Mattison.
All right. Hello, folks. Thank you, Catamaran, for having me and for hosting this wonderful event. Thank you to all the readers who read before me and who will read after me. I'm going to start off with, I think, the poem that was published in the latest issue. And, you know, this is an unlikely love poem in the pandemic. And it's entitled Unknown Season, and it's for Blair. The city curls into itself like steam-bent timber beams. As we winter inside this giant ship hull, everything run aground on cherry petal ice, we freeze in place. The studio apartment becomes 4 chambers, our movements like pumped blood. Each beat is purpose, or the illusion of it. We learn lines to a play, we make up for this unknown season. Rotate roles night to night, keep the wrong side of the outside from leaking up through the floorboards. Today, she paints a creation myth, oryxes and foliage on the walls with beet juice infused oils. I'm the mess hall cook, cast iron pot, arching its oil smoke back. The fire drinks its fuel, bristles atop the blackened ash, layer separating us from the Arctic depths outside. We had little choice, our wooden ribs of a theater, heartbeats in the quiet. We nailed the door shut, gaps sealed with candle wax. In here, she's a makeshift barber, cuts my hair seated on the lip of the bathtub. I publish the Gazette, recount masked forays out in a sparse wild, and the droves of sick continue to pile up, bury us in a bank of snow. So we bake into midnight, hum pockets of steam below rye crust. Our home swells with heat, rises like the chest of a sleeping sea bear. Our ribs nest while we catch our breath, our fire, the blood sealed inside of us, ever circulating. And this next poem I'm going to read is a new one. You know, if you're interested in checking out my poems, please do check out my books. One's out of Yes Yes Books from Portland, and the other one out of Seattle. So do check me out if you want. This next poem is about, I moved during the pandemic to the West Coast, and I'm up in the Napa Valley now. And it was just a little bit about sound, I think. The poem is called Undoing. I could have left the district at any time, but I kept my head down, stretch of interstate across my pillow, constant hiss of traffic outside my window, like thumbs dragged along the taut skin of a drum ridge. What trees? What quiet ripening of the ear under the canopy? I slept through the noises and fumes as if I needed permission to pick myself. From persimmon to mangosteen, sections of the fruit I peel fall out of the husk like little encyclopedias in my palm. I landed in a Main Street town, distant birds, valley wind, an unripe olive of a fly, the only vibration in the ear among the hillside vineyards. Only now I see how the citrus branch was weighed down onto the soil by too many ripe globes, holding on for what reason? Fruit skin given to split and ants. Months should be enough to unhear the traffic, so I can begin to hear again. I grow to a rhythm of inner water. The feast or famine of rain walks me like an egret waiting out waiting. I see the bird, like peace on two stilts, hundreds of feet away. I take one step closer, and it loads coiled legs, springs up, wings beating the silence. It flies a circle, lands a few yards further down the creek. At first, it was like a cruel joke. I am the probing oak root, undoing so much of the past, slow in its violence. I barely noticed the rippled concrete, like a rug bunched against the table leg. Given time, I'll brush pieces of a stone cloak from my shoulders. I sprout leaves from fingers, my ears, two knots in the trunk as it widens, another ring of seasons. All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Catamaran.
Thank you, Lucian. That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay, our next reader is Pepper Trail. Pepper Trail is the author of 3 volumes of poetry, including Cascade Siskiyou Poems by Painted Thrush Press in 2015. And it was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award in Poetry. His writing has appeared or is forthcoming in Atlanta Review, Rattle, Ascent, Terrain, and elsewhere. He lives in Ashland, Oregon, and works as an ornithologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So please welcome Pepper Trail.
Hello. Well, it's a great honor to be in Catamaran and to be reading with such wonderful writers and readers. As Kathryn mentioned, I work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and part of my work is in law enforcement and working to combat the wildlife trade. And so much of what I do is dealing with death. And one of the duties of people who deal with death, I think, is to bear witness. And this poem, which is in the Catamaran issue, is an active witness. It's called Disrobing a Bird. A warbler, a window fatality, victim of the misplaced sky, rests in my hand, flawless, dead but unmarked by death, as if breathless with expectancy. I cannot feel its weight, but its feathers against my skin are a softness, a certain comfort. Today, I am ferryman, carrying the body to another sort of life, from bird to specimen, into a vast congregation of the dead, where it will be preserved, an exemplar of its kind, its bones numbered, remembered, from time to time inspected, resurrected into the light. But first, all must be recorded, and so I undertake the measuring, the aging, and the sexing. There, done. A male, young, first autumn, first flight south, ended here by a pane of glass. Now it must leave itself behind, its feathers, its flesh, prepare to become pure specimen. A bird so small, this is work for fingers, intimate. Just a pinch, tears the skin, pulls it back, reveals the swelling chest, the muscles strong and red, powerhouse for tireless flight, the rich yellow fat, migration's fuel, distillation of 1,000 hunts, 1,000 prey. The unfeathered bird is a shock, always. No nakedness more helpless, more complete. The price of flight made clear. The fragility of limbs, delicate bubble of skull, all the armature of fingers fused into fist, forever clutching pinions, ready only for the sky. The rough cleaning done, now the remains will be conveyed into the finishing chamber, where the fine jaws of insects will cleanse the flesh, polish the bones, make all ready. And then, last, the notation in the ledger, the clean and closing box, the cabinet, the end. And the other poem I will read is a poem about a live bird. I much prefer to spend my time in nature watching live birds. This is to the largest owl in North America, which lives in my neighborhood in Southern Oregon. Ode to the Great Gray Owl. You are great with feathers, your bulk a weightless cloak, knit of hooks and barbs, color of broken stone, soft as rabbit fur, hiding your bloody heart. At the edge of everything, you wait unblinking, eyes centered in iron rings, invisible ears attending the whispering feet of mice within the snow. And then you are in the air, soundless, your feathers the stuff of air, your wings flare just so, you drop somehow to earth, legs suddenly long, diving deep, feet opening like nightmare jaws, 4 black fangs. The mouse in his home in the deep snow is pierced, pulled into the light, swallowed in one bite or two, and the owl melts into the trees, leaving in the white meadow the mark of an angel and a single drop of blood. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pepper. That's fabulous. I'm now very happy to introduce Gina Oschner. Gina Oschner divides her time between teaching at Corban University and Seattle Pacific University's low residency MFA program. She's the author of the novels The Russian Dream Book of Color and Flight and The Hidden Letters of Velta B. Her short stories have appeared in Iron Horse Literary Review, The Kenyon Review, and The New Yorker. Please welcome Gina Oschner.
Hi, thank you so much. What an honor to be amongst such a distinguished and most interesting group of glittering literati. I'm going to read a tiny bit from a story set in Romania before the revolution in 1989. A finger to the lips meant a contract of silence. Silence meant a secret. Silence, her grandfather said just before he died, was golden. If we were meant to be silent, her mother said before she died, then why did God give us voices? Her grandmother, who sat in the kitchen all day long looking at her icons perched in the windowsill, said being invisible and ordinary was even better than silence. Why, her mother countered. If I have to explain it to you, her grandmother's voice was like battery acid, then you'd never understand. Her mother snatched the icon of St. Demetrius from the windowsill and put it in the kitchen drawer behind the knives. Ditto for St. George. It's better to be invisible, her mother crooned to the icons. When her mother did things like that, then her grandmother made a point of dragging Lydia to one of the Orthodox churches that was still permitted to have services. Once inside the church, Lydia stared at the saints on the wood and metal iconostasis. The looming scrim separated the place where all the other grandmothers who had dragged children to the service stood on their aching feet from the place where the priest stood talking to God. There was a little door in the wall, and the priest could open it and crawl through. He left the door open just wide enough so they could hear him mumble, in the beginning God hovered, in the beginning God created. The words were like puzzle pieces. Lydia turned them over in her mouth. The beginning hovered, in the created God. In God hovered. What's going on back there? Lydia asked in a whisper. Shh, her grandmother said, a finger to her cracked lips. It's a special kind of magic. We're not supposed to know. Her father didn't go with them, which made her grandmother tremble with fury. Instead, he stayed in the kitchen and sang to the parakeets and canaries he kept in the corner. Oh, what will wash me white as snow? What will make me clean and whole? This was a song he used to sing at the underground Baptist assembly. It was illegal to be a Baptist, so he gave up the assembly and took up with birds. He still loved Jesus, but was doing so these days from his perch in the kitchen. That's exactly what he said one Friday as the orderlies in white smocks from the health ministry came and took him away. Where are they taking him? Lydia asked her grandmother when it happened, and her grandmother put a finger to her lips and said, shh, we're not supposed to know. That was the same year. She was 9, or maybe she was 10. Her mother showed her how to redden her lips with red crepe paper dipped in water. A tube of lipstick cost more than 2 weeks' wages, and even then, you had to know someone who knew someone. With a little spittle and soot from the windowsill, they made thick mascara. They were lucky. There was so much soot lining every surface of their house that they never ran out. They made themselves up like this every Friday before they stood in the line outside the neat co-op. The line stretched the length of 2 city blocks. Her mother stood, back arched, hip jutted. Lydia studied her mother, then canted a hip. They stood in all kinds of weathers. It was weakness to complain. Her mother checked her mascara in the grimy window pane. When they made it to the front of the line, the men behind the co-op counter fastened their gazes on her mother as if they were salt and she were meat, as if they were made for each other. And for a minute or two, her mother was no longer her mother. Her voice lifted, her eyes brightened. She seemed to float, buoyed by smiles from the men. Her mother handed over her vouchers, good for a chunk of sausage that tasted like sawdust. Then, with a wink, one of the men led Lydia and her mother through a swinging door into the back of the co-op where all the refrigerators hummed like doves tabering in the eaves. Lydia sat on a box and studied grammar while her mother and the meat man talked in the back room. What do you talk about back there? Lydia asked one time as her mother led her out the co-op through the oversized metal door where deliveries were made. Her mother put her finger to her red lips. A minute or two later, the man returned, all smiles, and produced a heavy package wrapped in brown butcher paper. This happened every Friday, her mother chatting for a long time with one man or another at the co-op, Lydia sitting on a box with her homework. Then a quick departure through the back door, her mother's purse laden with meat wrapped in butcher paper and leaking blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Great story. All right, now I'm introducing Jeff Fearnside. Jeff Fearnside's poetry has appeared in numerous literary journals and anthologies, including the Paris Review, the Los Angeles Review, the Fourth River, Permafrost, and Forest Understory, Creative Inquiry in an Old Growth Forest by University of Washington Press. Honors for his work include writing residencies at the Bernheim Arboretum and Research Forest, and the H.G. Andrews Experimental Forest, the Peace Corps Writers Award for Best Book of Poetry, and an Oregon Arts Commission Individual Artist Fellowship. He teaches writing and literature at Oregon State University. Please welcome Jeff Fearnside.
Thank you. Wow, what a tremendous honor to be part of this group and to be part of this absolutely gorgeous issue. It really is one of the most beautiful literary journals out there, and I'm very honored to be in this issue and looking forward to diving into the rest of it. So I'd like to begin with my poem that appeared in Catamaran, and that poem is called Skyhole. Even in the harbored shadows of an ancient forest, even absent the claw-fingered touch of humans, old-growth conifers don't live forever. They eventually give in to the incessant demands of obligate parasites or fungal disease, or perhaps the wintry whim of storm or flash fancy of flood or fire, and go crashing to earth, pulling others down with them and ripping a sky hole in the forest canopy. Light pours into the darkness. New plants and animals move into the opening. Sun-loving shrubs and flowers blossom, while larger species of voles and wrens appear. The dead logs are a fete for decomposers, a nursery for young hemlocks and ferns. Douglas firs rise from the disrupted soil. The understory fills out. All that lives in light reaches to light, and in time, the canopy closes again. I'd like to read just a couple more poems. The next one originally appeared in the Paris Review, and it is titled Welcome the Stranger. Would shy Sirius or sugar glider, swing shift foreman or taxi driver call the day better than the night? Or say the moon has only one side, that which we can see? Is $1 worth more face up in a palm and less face down? Who would wish for only a right hand? Does anyone still call the left sinister? Look closely. A flame is not all light. Only broken cells possess no shadows. Do not trust those who live in halves, who would shut all the windows and close the doors. Welcome the dark stranger who calls in a storm. Warm the soup on the stove. Break a fresh loaf. Sit and allow your eyes to adjust to your companion. What seemed a monstrous void becomes a shivering figure caped against the rain or sheltering in a morning shawl. Perhaps a chimney sweep, as it were, fresh from work. Or black cat, now at your feet, rubbing against them, grateful for a full belly and the attention. And the last poem I'd like to read originally appeared in ISLE, which is the acronym for Interdisciplinary Studies in Literature and Environment. And it's titled After Blackberry Picking. We never think of rot when savoring sweet, but they lie together and embrace like thorns. We remain live-limbed, and yet streaks of gray have crept in. We gather and look into our hard plastic pails, emptier than our toiling had led us to expect they would be. We are eating as we go, placing the berries on each other's tongues, our mouths wine dark from the harvest of this invasive, with fingers thick canes that crowd out the smaller buried natives. Jam holds no appeal in this season. What in this world can be made for keeping? To pick now is enough. Sunburned, scratched, juice-streaked, and full. The sugar of death on our lips is what makes the berries sweet. Without it, it is all just showy display, a purple noise in open fields to mark the seasons by. Thanks again very much. It's been great being here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Well, it's a pleasure now to introduce Zack Rogow and hopefully Yoko Kamori, who are going to be discussing and reading their translations of Yosano Akiko's work. Zack Rogow was a co-winner of the Penn Book of the Month Club Translation Award for Earthlight by André Breton. Rogow received the Bay Area Book Reviewers Association Award for his translation of George Sand's novel Horace. I think Yoko Kamori is not here yet, but I will introduce her anyway. She's a prize-winning poet who lives in the United States and writes tanka and haiku in Japanese. She won the Asahi Tanka Contest in 2014, the Asahi Haiku Contest in 2015, and the Kyoshi Haiku Contest in 2016. She's published essays and poetry in Heisei Coterie Literary Magazine, a U.S.-based journal of poetry in Japanese. Please welcome Zack Rogow and soon Yoko Kamori.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Kathryn and Catamaran, for featuring our work. And we're going to talk about and read some poems by Yosano Akiko, who lived in Japan from 1878 to 1942. And she wrote, I think, the first great book of modern poetry, which is called Tangled Hair, Midaregami, which she wrote at the age of 20 about her scandalous love affair with the young, promising poet Yosano Tekan, who was then a married man. And she wrote in the traditional Japanese tanka 5-line form, which goes back to the 7th century of the Common Era. But she changed the tanka forever by including very contemporary themes and imagery in her poetry. So we're very excited to be presenting some poems of hers that have never appeared in English before. And she was one of the most energetic human beings, I think, who ever wrote literature. She wrote, and I'm not exaggerating, 50,000 poems. She raised 11 children, and she also wrote 11 books of prose. And in her spare time, she translated the classic Tale of Genji into modern Japanese and was the dean of and founding dean of a school for girls in Japan. Truly an extraordinary human being. And I hope that Yoko has now gotten home from work, and we can begin to read the poems. Maybe what I'll do is read the English, and when Yoko arrives, she will read the Japanese. So this is from a series of poems that Yosano Akiko wrote in 1914. And the poems are about her husband's emotional crisis. He left the family at a certain point and went to France. And Akiko followed him to France, and they had she took the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which was new then, all the way across Russia, and joined him in Paris. And so she wrote this series of poems about that and that period in her life. On New Year's Day, in the morning, a plume of my breath dissolves into the sky, and I'm happy. That's the first poem. These are very short 5-line tanka poems. A shamisen, by the way, is a Japanese instrument that's kind of like a banjo. That's the closest equivalent we might have. While I write, you pluck the same string of the shamisen over and over as a light shower keeps falling. And her next poem is, at sunset in the spring, walking down a long, narrow corridor, suddenly I feel like a nun. This is one of my favorites. If only I could be that torn cloud floating away in the autumn twilight and not thinking about you. And this next one she wrote on the Trans-Siberian Railroad in Siberia. Waiting for the whistle, I stare at my feet, trying not to look at the train next to ours with its cargo of prisoners. That's one of the things about the tanka form that's so amazing to me, is that in only 5 lines, 31 syllables, it tells a whole story. It's almost like the fulcrum of a story. And here's one that she wrote in Paris when she finally reunited with Tekan in Paris. When I hear the Spanish girl downstairs start to play the piano, I know it's time to get out of bed and comb my black hair. So I hope Yoko is here now and she can read the Japanese. Yoko, are you with us? Are you there, Yoko?
Hi, Zack. Do you see
Hi.
me? I'm not able to get her on the screen for some reason.
Oh. All right, let me text her.
I just texted her as well, so I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe she's stuck in traffic still.
Yeah, I would love to have you hear Yoko read these poems because she reads so beautifully in Japanese, and these poems sound so beautiful in Japanese. There are only 31 syllables every tanka, and so the concision, the precision, the economy of language is very extraordinary in these poems.
Yeah, I love how you, when you taught world poetry, you would have us hear both the original language and then the translated into English. And you can hear some of the sounds in the original language that you don't get in the translation. So that's why it was wonderful we could have Yoko with us to read it in Japanese. But if she can't make it, at least we got to hear the English version.
Well, I'm really excited that we've been able to work on poems by Yosano Akiko, because I think she's really one of the greatest poets who's probably not even known to most readers of English. In Japan, her name is a household word. Yay, Yoko's here. Fantastic.
Okay.
So Yoko,
yeah.
I'm just going to give the first line of each poem and ask you to read it. Okay.
One moment. Let me put the earphone.
Yoko just rushed home, driving home to be with us.
Yeah.
So thank you, Yoko.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So the first one is on New Year's Day in the morning.
Okay. Oh, you want to say the whole 5 lines?
I've already read the English, so just read the Japanese.
You have to say the 5 together, otherwise I cannot break the tanka.
Okay.
Yeah.
On New Year's Day in the morning, a plume of my breath dissolves into the air, and I'm happy.
我が息の虚空に散るも嬉しけれ、年の明けたる一日二日。
Thank you.
You're welcome.
While I write, you pluck the same string of the shamisen over and over as a light shower keeps falling.
三味線の一の弦のみかき鳴らし、しぐれ通りぬ踏みかけるとき。
Thank you. At sunset in the spring, walking down a long, narrow corridor, suddenly I feel like a nun.
牢などのあまり長きを歩むとき、天の心地す春の暮れ方。
If only I could be that torn cloud floating away in the autumn twilight and not thinking about you.
秋風の吹く暮れ方にちぎれ雲。I'm sorry. 秋風の吹く暮れ方にちぎれ飛ぶ。雲とならまし、君を忘れて。
Waiting for the whistle, I stare at my feet, trying not to look at the train next to ours with its cargo of prisoners.
真向かいの囚人者をば見ぬために、節目をしつつ、増えなれと待つ。
When I hear the Spanish girl downstairs start to play the piano, I know it's time to get out of bed and comb my black hair.
下に住むスペインの子がピアノをば、叩けば起きて黒髪をすく。
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. It's a beautiful.
Thank you, Zack, and thank you, Yoko. I'm so
You're
glad we got to
welcome.
hear both the
Yeah.
languages side by side. Beautiful reading.
Thank you. Thank you.
You.
I'm glad I made it.
Yes. Thank you. Grand finale,
Thank you so much.
folks.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank everyone for coming. It was a wonderful evening. We had 111 people listening in, and just such a beautiful variety of poems and stories and memoirs. So thank you all for sharing your work with us. If you would like to buy that spring issue and read the rest of those prose, you can see right here that it says buy spring issue. That will take you to our website to order your own copy and support Catamaran. So thank you and good night.